Kobane, Syria. An undercover CIA operative desperately escapes, chasing men and hides under the floorboards where she contacts her handler. Meanwhile, at a CIA outpost nearby, Joe McNamara, along with members of the Lioness program, observe a local man crawling toward their compound dragging something behind him. Just then, Joe gets the call from her undercover agent who reveals her cover has been blown as her cross tattoo was accidentally seen, so Joe plans to extract her. Just then, the team monitoring the wall realizes too late the crawling man has a detonation cord and he sets off a massive explosion. A gunfight then breaks out as fighters seemingly appear out of nowhere. Joe calls in an airstrike as the battle rages on, and soon a gunship appears and lays down fire, allowing Joe's team to board nearby choppers to extract their mole. Joe, who is back at base, gets another call from the scared woman as men are closing in on her location. Joe contacts her superior, requesting authorization for the extraction. Just then she hears her mole screaming as she is grabbed, but without missing a beat, Joe orders the chopper team to maintain their positions, then calls in an airstrike to the location. Just before the woman can be attacked, the airstrike hits, destroying the compound and leaving Joe to consider the weight of her actions. Fry cook Cruz Manuelos returns after a shift where her loser boyfriend is hanging out with his friends. He berates her for making $7 an hour, noting how another girl there made $500 at the club. Cruz calls her a stripper and ends up getting into a fight with the girl, and her boyfriend ends up punching her in the face. Cruz silently heads to her room and breaks down in tears, fed up with her life. The next morning she wakes before her boyfriend, gets ready, and picks up a frying pan from the kitchen as she knows what is going to happen. Her boyfriend wakes and begins to berate her, but she knocks him over the head and takes off running out of the house. Her boyfriend chases after her into town, but Cruz runs into a U.S. Marine recruitment office, and an officer there forces him to back off. The officer then offers her a job. Cruz sleeps in the forest that night, but at work the next day her boyfriend and his buddies show up to intimidate her. She works late that night to try and avoid them, but her boss notices and calls the cops who offer to take her to a shelter until she can file a restraining order in the morning. Cruz sits her Marine entrance test and impresses her recruiters with her physical and mental capabilities, and news of her achievements reach the general in charge who requests a meeting with her. Based on her athletic background and her current physical abilities, he wonders why she didn't pursue college, and Cruz explains she had no family to support her. The general explains that Marines are relentless in protecting the weak and thinks she has what it takes to become exceptional. If she accepts, she has to say goodbye to her entire life. But Cruz has no issue and accepts. Joe is called into a debriefing with her supervisor, CIA agent Caitlin Meade, along with CIA Deputy Director Byron Westfield, who demand an explanation for the drone strike. They think they had time to save the mole, but Joe explains that she was already caught, and with 40 ISIS members at the location, the drone strike was necessary to protect her team and the operation. Westfield relents, but demands she check the next recruit for tattoos thoroughly. Afterwards, Meade orders Joe to head to Fort Bragg and find another recruit to replace her, but Joe still feels guilty about her actions. Joe returns home to her husband Neil and two daughters Charlie and Kate, who haven't seen her in a very long time. And while Charlie is excited to see her, Kate is not interested in talking to her mom, noting that she hates Joe as home. Neil thinks maybe she should call first so he can update her so she doesn't feel left out of conversations with the kids. A while later, Joe heads to Fort Bragg where she is given details on Cruz and her accomplishments, but Joe doesn't think she would be a right fit for her program. She observes Cruz as she spars with a male soldier and is slightly impressed with her ferocity, even though she ends up losing. The two privately meet after, where Joe explains that the Lioness team was first created to frisk female Muslims, but has now evolved into an undercover infiltration program where operatives get close to the wives or daughters of their targets and find their location. Joe thinks this may be dark for some, but Cruz sees no problem with the method. Joe then has her remove all her clothing to check for tattoos and sees the scars left behind from her previous relationship, but Cruz is not ashamed of them. Joe likes her and accepts her into the Lioness program. Cruz is then introduced to her first target, Iraqi militia leader Asmar Ali Amrohai, and her mark, his daughter. Cruz asks Joe about her life, but Joe doesn't want to build any connections, telling her they aren't friends. Cruz is apprehensive as she wants to know the person responsible for saving her if her cover is blown, but Joe tells her to trust that she will be saved. They soon arrive at a military base in Kuwait and are introduced to the Lioness team: Bobby, Two Cups, Tex, Randy, and Tucker. Her target is staying somewhere in the city, but where Asmar is staying is the million-dollar question. Early the next morning, Joe wakes Cruz as their mark is on the move. On their way, Joe drills Cruz's cover story into her. She begins to get cold feet as she knows nothing about her target, but Joe reminds her that's on purpose. Joe gets out first, and Cruz soon heads into a Louis Vuitton store where she spots her target. She bumps into the woman, introducing herself as Zara, and learns the girl's name is Aaliyah, and the two chat for a while. Aaliyah seems to take a liking to Cruz and invites her to join her for shopping. Joe sees the two exit the store together and confirms that Cruz is in. Joe meets with Meade, giving her updates on Cruz's progress with Aaliyah, but she wants to test Cruz even further, and Meade gives her the go-ahead. Meade asks about the family, and Joe reluctantly explains that the family is doing well. Meanwhile, Kate gets into a brutal fight at a school soccer match. Neil works as a surgeon in a hospital and is currently reviewing a case with his colleagues where they find a massive tumor in a young girl Maddie's head, and he is worried about breaking the news to the parents. He later meets with them and gets Maddie to leave with a nurse before informing the parents about the massive tumor in her head. Due to the extent of the growth, the tumor has reached her eye, and they would need to remove the eye if they operated. Without the surgery, she would live another 6 months, while with the surgery, her timing would be unknown, but her life after would be filled with pain. The father, angry over the lack of options, punches Neil, but he understands their pain. Afterwards, he picks up Kate, scolding her for fighting. She fought because someone called her a slur and thinks Neil wouldn't understand because he is white, so he has to remind her he is her father first. Joe gets home to hear Kate complaining that Neil took her cell phone. She joins Neil by the pool where she sees his injury, and the two sit and talk about his day for a while. She then goes to Kate, who wonders if they're getting a divorce, as she wants to live with Dad, but Joe pops her bubble. She thinks she is grown, so Joe talks to her woman to woman, telling her to find her purpose and to stop being selfish and think about her father for once. Later, Joe and Neil are having an intimate moment in the kitchen when Kate enters in tears and apologizes to Neil, but it turns out she was faking it. Cruz is back in the US, held up in a hotel. She passes the time working out, but unable to sleep, she goes for a run. A few minutes into her run, she is suddenly grabbed by masked men and forced into a van. Joe and Neil are in the middle of lovemaking when both their cell phones begin to ring. Neil is being called in for surgery while Joe is called into a meeting. Joe is brought to a secret facility where she is initially tortured by being blasted with high-pressure water and left locked in a cold, damp cell with loud music. After what seems like hours, she wakes to see dry clothes folded nearby and hurriedly gets dressed. She tries to fight off some men that enter but gets knocked down and tied up. They demand her name, and when she refuses, they begin to waterboard her. But despite this, Cruz finds the strength to fight and gets knocked out once more. She is then blindfolded to a chair when none other than Joe walks in, revealing this was her test. Joe wanted to know how long it would take her to break, but Cruz insists she will never break. Joe takes a seat and reminds her of her broken background, her once useless life, and how it made her feel, bringing Cruz to tears. Joe sees that she can be broken, then tells her to prepare for round 2. The men in charge of the exercise are hesitant to continue without a signature somewhere as they don't want to be held liable, so Joe reluctantly signs, telling them of Cruz's fear of being restrained. The men enter the room to a composed Cruz, telling her she will learn where her limits are so she can push them. A man frees her, but Cruz instantly attacks them until she is held down and begins to scream in terror. Joe doesn't want it to end, but the soldier in charge has had enough and calls it off. Cruz again attacks the men, laying down a vicious beating on the men until she is pulled off once more. A while later, Joe and Cruz return to Fort Bragg, where Joe explains that the test was to see how long she could survive before she could be extracted. Cruz never wants to go through that again, but Joe warns that if she gets caught, she will endure much worse. Joe joins the other Lioness team members at their team home, and after washing up and resting, she explains to the team what she experienced at the hands of the soldiers. The Lioness team don't take this well, and soon track down soldiers involved to a bar where Bobby starts a fight with the soldiers, which results in a brawl. Joe wants to take revenge on the man that held her down, but almost ends up choking him out before the other team members pull her off and manage to calm her down. Just then, she gets a call from Aaliyah and rushes outside. Aaliyah invites her to join her and her friends on a trip to Chesapeake, and though Cruz explains that she was just in a car wreck, Aaliyah insists that they meet up. Cruz makes her way to Chesapeake with Joe, giving her tips over the phone. Cruz soon gets to a bridge and tosses her cell phone into the water. Joe meets with Meade, giving her updates on Cruz. She is worried that the party invite may be a cover to expose Cruz and has a team close by to extract her if things go south. A senator comes to talk with Meade, so Joe goes to leave the bar when she is stopped by CIA officer Kyle McManus, her former colleague. He wants to borrow her team in order to pull off a grab during a prisoner transfer, as one of his contacts involved in a trafficking ring was arrested for DUI. Joe thinks he's gone mad, but Kyle is out of options as he cannot afford for Homeland Security or Congress to learn of his operations on the U.S.-Mexico border. Joe is hesitant to get involved, but offers Kyle 3 men who she needs returned in 24 hours. Cruz makes it to Aaliyah's family home and is led to the poolside. Meanwhile, the security guards run her plates and details. Cruz meets up with Aaliyah, who introduces her to friends, who secretly call Cruz another stray that Aaliyah has brought in. Aaliyah then gives her the lowdown on the complicated friend group and how they all secretly sleep with Kamal, the brother of Aaliyah's fiancé Ehsan. Aaliyah suggests that the two visit the beach together, but Cruz's bathing suit is too boring for her. Cruz gets a more revealing bathing suit, but is too self-conscious about her scars and body. Aaliyah sees the bruises but begins to suspect that Cruz didn't actually meet in a wreck. The Lioness team plans to rent a yacht to get a closer view, as they cannot approach from land without being exposed. On the other hand, they learn that a doctor has been called in to examine Cruz and want to extract her, but have no way of communicating as all calls in and out of the building are being screened. Joe then tells the team about Kyle's extraction mission, so Two Cups, Randy, and Tucker volunteer to head out. Joe, Bobby, and Tex stay behind, listening in on Cruz's bugs as she meets with the doctor. After observing Cruz, the doctor believes her injuries were caused by a fist. Hearing this, Bobby wants to extract her, but Joe refuses, begging Cruz to talk her way out of this one. Meanwhile, the doctor reveals he is legally bound to report injuries caused by abuse, but Cruz fakes her tears, explaining that she is just trying to start a new life and make friends, and that the man who hit her was arrested. Tex wants another go at the men that did this to Cruz, but Joe reveals it's all her fault. The doctor reports to Aaliyah that Cruz is doing just fine and just needs rest. The two go for a walk along the beach where Aaliyah reveals that she plans to get married soon, possibly in Kuwait or Dubai. The two continue walking and talking for a while, until Aaliyah warns her to be careful of 2 of her friends, Malika and Neshwa, as they hate every friend she tries to make. Cruz wonders why have such friends, but learns that she has no choice, as her family picks her entire life for her. Joe returns home to find Kate making out with a boy in the dark. With a calm demeanor, she demands the boy's cell phone, calls his mother and explains what is going on, then kicks the boy out. Kate refuses to go to her room until she learns what she did wrong. She tells Joe that she didn't do anything Joe never did at her age, and since she didn't ask to be born, she will live her life how she pleases. Joe goes to speak with Neil about the incident with Kate, but it turns out Neil gave her permission to make out while keeping her jeans on. Joe thinks he should have consulted with her. He reminds her she is always busy. That night, Cruz is unable to sleep while the others are out enjoying the pool. She goes to the kitchen but is unable to find anything to drink, so she starts drinking from the tap. One of the guys comes in and passes her a drink, then begins to forcefully come onto her, but Cruz hits him under his throat and heads back to her room. The man refuses to accept the disrespect and follows Cruz to her room, trying to force his way in. Cruz grabs a pen and stands ready, but a security guard comes to defuse the situation. Meanwhile in Texas, Kyle is with Two Cups, Randy, and Tucker in a truck waiting to catch sight of the transport van carrying their target and begin to follow it. But they soon realize that another van is following the transport van. They allow the van to pass them and get behind the transport. But as soon as it gets off the highway, Kyle activates an EMP device that disables the truck, and the other trailing van gets taken out by a trailer. Kyle extracts the target while the other guys keep an eye on the other group of men, most of whom are dead. The group soon clears out. Another van rams them on the road, but they rip it to shreds with bullets. They change vehicles at a nearby barn before blowing the car up and driving away. The guys are worried about the backlash from something like this, but Kyle is sure nothing will come of it. Cruz learns that Aaliyah's fiancé has planned a surprise trip for them, and the Lioness team overhears this and hurriedly packs their things and heads out. During the car ride, Aaliyah's friend lets it slip they're going on a plane ride, and Joe worries as they could lose track of Cruz. They enter a private airfield where the Lioness team is unable to enter. They need the plane's tail number in order to track it, but Cruz thinks on her feet and calls out the tail number, acting ignorant as to what it is, leaving Joe proud. She then boards the plane, unaware of where she is headed. The group soon end up at a beach in Long Island. Aaliyah's guards are observing a seemingly innocent yacht a distance out, unaware that the Lioness team are posted there keeping a close eye on Cruz while Bobby is laying on the beach nearby. Cruz and Aaliyah swim out into the sea where Aaliyah expresses her reluctance to get married. She has no say in who she gets to marry, but is thankful that Ehsan is kind. The Lioness team look into Ehsan and his brother Kamal, who turn out to be Saudi royals who own a company called Qudra Petrol, a powerful oil company they've never heard of before. The wedding would be the perfect place to take out Aaliyah's father Asmar, but if it's held in the Emirates or Saudi Arabia, things will be difficult. Joe asks for an update on Kyle's mission and learns it was a mess with a daytime extraction and dead bodies left behind. Joe angrily calls Kyle, demanding an explanation as he lied about his operation. He admits to this, but tells her they are safe as police link the heist to the local cartel. He is about to be debriefed, and Joe angrily demands to know everything afterwards. Kyle enters the briefing room where Meade and Westfield are waiting for him. Meade is aware of the recent hit on the prison transport where Kyle's contact within the Sinaloa cartel was grabbed. Kyle tries to lie that the cartel was responsible, but Meade shows him video footage of the incident where he was caught on camera leaving the scene. Meade is pissed that he has put her in a position to keep him out of prison. Westfield demands to know where he got the team, and Kyle tries to divert, but eventually is forced to reveal it was the Lioness team. Despite the bad optics, Kyle reveals he had no choice as the cartel is set to bring in 5 Al-Qaeda operatives into the country, and if his contact was locked up, he would lose all his intel. This intel interests Meade, who tells him to work on getting them solid proof while they try to cover up his actions. Joe gets a call from Kyle, revealing that the CIA already knew about their involvement. She gets another call from Meade, who demands her location as they need to talk. Meanwhile, Kate is in a car with her friends when they get into a car wreck. Neil is in surgery when he gets the news and rushes out, only to see Kate being brought in on a stretcher with a broken leg and a concussion. He and the other surgeons go over her scans where she has a broken femur and fractured vertebrae. But despite this, Kate got the better end as one of the girls needs immediate surgery and one didn't make it. He tells Joe about the incident and Joe promises to be there. Kate's blood work comes back and Neil is shocked to learn that Kate is pregnant. But instead of getting angry, he feels disappointed. He goes to talk with Kate, reminding her of the 2 things he always said would change her life: cars and intercourse. She still has a bit of an attitude until she learns that one of her friends died and she is pregnant. She tries to deny this, but Neil has had enough of her excuses, warning that if the fetus had survived the impact and survives the anesthesia, she will have the biggest decision to make in her life. He thinks her stubborn attitude has forced her into this position, and she apologizes, but Neil doesn't want an apology and tells her this is her opportunity to learn a valuable lesson. This series is so boring, I'll end the recap here. Go and watch if you're interested.
Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you can watch more movies like this. Thanks for watching.